that require that kind of space would be those businesses that do not need a lot of impulse traffic. You see, you don't have a retail in an area where there are no shoppers. That's the problem. You don't have a restaurant in that area unless you have a very strong pull factor where people would come from 20 miles away to your restaurant and eat your food. So the only kind of businesses that can plant the first seeds in these gentrified suburbs would be those businesses that are very niche, where with word of mouth people will come from far away because you're here and you're not nowhere else. In the case of Chinatown, the niche businesses that moved in, other than the tourist ones, were the gay bars. And I think the first one, you really should give credit to Abby Long. Right, way at the beginning, yeah. But in Joo Chiat, the same process is happening. But the niche businesses are the Vietnamese girly bars, which of course is causing their own problems. But it's repeating the same thing. In Kampong Glam, unfortunately, that's another gentrified district. You know that road, is it called Busara Street? Busora Street, or something that leads up to Sultan Mosque? 5-6 years after the gentrified area, half the buildings are still empty. Because there are all these restrictions about what you can do or cannot do nearest the big mosque of Singapore. You see, and so these niche businesses of immorality, well, they're all immorality, right? Whether you're talking girls or boys, they can't move into the Kampong Glam area. And that one is actually having the toughest time of all the gentrified districts. Yeah, that's my take.
Can I hop in here and ask, how come a very obvious choice for gay venues to locate would be Gayland, which is already a ready-made, sleazy place for sex, right? So maybe this question is both for you and for Alex. Alex, when you're looking around to set up the rival, did you consider Gayland where the rent may be cheaper than Chinatown?
No, the rent is not cheaper.
So you did consider Gayland?
I asked a bit. I didn't really consider. The initial, mapping out of where it could go. But anyway, gays don't consider themselves sleazy no matter how much sex they have.
You're talking about a place where you think that the authorities may close one eye on you because they're already there in big numbers.
No, also because a business that depends on free fuck cannot get mixed up with it in a locality that depends on paid fucks.
Right.
Why not?
The customers get very confused. Do I pay or don't I pay? Do I tip or don't I tip?
The association thing is the location, I think, helps a lot.
Right, because Gayland is no more.
You're approaching it from a Western perspective. You're approaching from the perspective of sex and no sex. We're not. We're approaching it from the perspective of good and evil. Good is gay, heterosexual evil. No sex.
Rival is just round the corner from Cheong Sia Street.
It's not part of Cheong Sia Street. Sure, it's very weird.
I think there was some validity in that analysis because obviously other gay bars have moved to the area and have stayed and all that. Any questions that you may now remember about India as well?
I've got a question for both Rob and Chris. Some of you may know in a parallel life I'm a safer sex outreach worker. I'm just curious for both of you whether in your analysis or your understanding of Indian online community and for Chris, community in Chinatown, how do you consider, where would you place safer sex in your respective communities?
Well, I think in the Indian context, at least in the cities like Hyderabad, is that it's interesting that you bring that up because HIV and safer sex are the entry point for gay rights in India, right? And that's what I think is so interesting, is that at least in Hyderabad, at least last time I was there was last year, there were no real sort of like physical world social groups, right? But there were probably a half a dozen safer sex groups, right? So that was sort of the way that people can interact in the public sphere.
Was it just physical groups or the online groups?
Physical groups, and they can interact in the public sphere, right? And sort of be openly gay, but sort of like the segue is HIV prevention.
I'm just curious, what extent do they use the online as a means of outreach or tap on to reach out to the online communities?
I think there's a lot of information online in Hyderabad and in Bombay too about safer sex practice. I don't know how much people use it, to be honest. I think that there's, HIV is really on the increase in India, and I think part of it is that without any gay rights or without any sort of gay future for people or any kind of good future, they don't necessarily think about safer sex.
If I'm not wrong, and I know I'm not wrong because I did volunteer with AFA last year. They had this outreach program where they would cooperate with the sauna owners and the bar owners in Chinatown, get them to at least let AFA put the safe sex material at the entrance, right? So if people want to get condoms or those cards telling you about safe sex and all that, you can do so, right? Yeah. But AFA doesn't provide, AFA's supply of condoms is limited, right? So it's more like a message thing rather than like, I'm here to provide free condoms for you. Right?
And then there's some saunas who take them and sell them.
Yes, but together, right? As to how effective this is, I'm not too sure because you have to get the condoms from the front desk, and some people are just lazy, right? So after you have used that one condom that you get in your locker at the sauna, right? Some people are lazy. They don't want to go to the front desk to actually get more, and that's where the danger starts. Like people start having sex unprotected.
Do you see safer sex having a place anywhere else beyond those spaces, those places that you have just mentioned? I mean, any more than
Do you think that it works? Do you think the message gets through?
One of the things I see, one of the negative things I see about online interaction with people is there is this message out there today that HIV is sort of a disease you can live with, right? And that you can just take the pills twice a day and you'll be okay. And I think that message is slowly, when it's out there online, people do read it and they come to believe that it is okay to have unsafe sex.
But that's not the situation here in Singapore.
Right?
As in, it's all right to live with HIV/AIDS.
It's all right to bear back.
No. That's not. Wait, that's the message.
I have my worries.
Right. As in, like people think that it's all right to bear back when it's actually very dangerous.
And it's really not. And that's what I find so interesting is that people my age, have never really had unsafe sex, right? And I think a lot of people, after 20 years of having safe sex, it gets old after a while. And I think that's part of what's happening to a lot of people, is that it's just...
But would you say that, online is something that is just a repository of information?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really change people's attitudes and behavior. It requires a whole lot more intense intervention.
Yeah, but I think if you read again and again and again online that HIV is something you can live with.
Well, this gentleman has been inactive. What do you think? Do you think online information changes people's behavior?
It's more of probably won't see it as intervention because you can only intervene so much online. I think one way of looking at it is online is more of a means rather than an end itself. It's outreach. So you tell people about physical spaces, about information repositories and all that. So it's a start towards something because there's so many people online these days. There's online communities out there everywhere. So it's a safe space for a lot of people. So sexual safety is just one issue in addition to personal safety. It's a means.
Well, when I was running around, I asked my workers to count the used condoms in the trash. Not very encouraging. Either the customers were not having sex,